This is an article by CNN Health about a Stanford University study in Santa Clara County, California, using an antibody test throughout a random sample of the population within the county. One of the doctors involved in the study, Dr. J. Bhattacharya, states that the disease is more widespread than most people think. In Santa Clara County, the study shows that 2.49% to 4.16% or 48,000 to 81,000 people are likely infected, while local testing showed only 956 confirmed cases. What the title of the article misses is that more people being infected is a good thing. With more people being actually infected and the same amounts of death from the disease, mortality rates drop. In another interview, Dr. Bhattacharya stated that estimated mortality rates were between 0.1% and 0.2%, explaining that COVID-19 is little worse than the flu, twice as bad as the flu in terms of case fatality rate. This is significantly less than the figures that drove us into shutting the country down at a 3.9% mortality rate for those infected. Though this review starts with the above article, its focus is more on the whole COVID-19 narrative and response as interpreted by a liberty-minded, eco-critical perspective. A handful of corporate conglomerates make up a majority. Many companies people interact with on a daily basis. The food we eat, the news we watch, the cars we drive, the wars we are told are necessary, the funding for science and medical research, pharmaceutical products, and so much more come from pretty much one big sprawling mutant business partnership. This can be concerning due to conflicts of interest, especially in healthcare, where healthy people are not profitable and dead people are not profitable, but sick people are willing to pay for whatever treatment is believed to help with the condition. The mainstream media is never cut and dry. There is always something left out or something overemphasized in an attempt to try and work some sort of angle. Thus, going around and disregarding all other opinions deemed by the mainstream media as fake news is potentially dangerous. Information is so mixed with opinion, leaving it up to the consumer to make some logical sense of things. However crazy the world is, everyone should be entitled to an opinion. Fear or danger should not negate or diminish that fact. One example of fear being used by mainstream media narratives to guide public opinion can be seen in the emphasis on mortality rates that are not particularly sound in foundation. The formula for the mortality rates as described in the media is flawed. The denominator is flawed because it is based on the number of confirmed tests, which we all know has been very limited through most of the country. For the seasonal flu, they usually create an estimate of people infected. The numerator is also flawed due to how deaths by COVID-19 are graded. Someone who dies from any other cause but has COVID-19 or is suspected of having COVID-19 is marked as a death as a result of COVID-19 as per CDC guidelines. Dying with the disease and dying as the result of the disease are two different things being treated as the same. This flaw is visible when looking at the results of the Stanford study mentioned previously. These days it seems that many people are split in belief on one key issue: trust in source of information. Some people trust the mainstream media, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN on the left or Fox on the right. Some people don't and look to YouTube, podcasts, foreign news, or other sources. With the invention of the term fake news, there doesn't seem to be much room to form your own opinion about a topic. The censorship is quite real. Just the other day, Facebook censored a story I shared that featured a mortician discussing how cause of death has always been unreliable, being that it is usually the best guess of whoever is on scene. From this, she made the point that many of the COVID-19 deaths are likely inaccurate. There is almost no middle ground or room for debate anymore. Either you view the world through popular narrative, or you don't. The reaction received when expressing doubt of the popular narrative usually sounds something like, that conspiracy is way too big to be true, or people are too smart for that many people to be tricked or deceived in that way, usually inferring that they believe that they themselves are too smart to be deceived, therefore it cannot be the case. Somehow it is impossible to fathom that with 8 or so corporate conglomerates owning most of the world, they fund most research, fund most schools and institutions, heavily influence policy and politicians, heavily influence media, routinely fund both sides of conflicts, and if you fall in line with whatever hot topic is being hyped, it is probably for their best interest, not yours. A bleed-off effect from the fake news issue is the fake science dilemma. If a scientist is not endorsed or supported by the corporate chain of control, then they and all their findings are also branded a fake. This happens reflexively for those who trust mainstream scientists and media. I've had people tell me that they don't trust doctors or scientists on YouTube videos. I first saw Dr. Bhattacharya on a YouTube video, and later found the local and CNN articles on his study. This topic is also double-edged. People like myself reflexively distrust mainstream science. Another YouTube scientist I have found as interesting is Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, a systems engineer holding 4 degrees from MIT. He made a good point in one of his videos asking, what is science? Throughout history, important discoveries and innovations have come from all sorts of people, from all walks of life. It is not until just recently that being properly credentialed and endorsed is the ultimate tell of whether your logic or findings are valid. One issue that Dr. Shiva discusses is that this whole pandemic is a setup, designed to redirect healthcare decisions from your doctor's hands to the hands of politicians. The concept of one-size-fits-all healthcare vs. individual healthcare. This is visible in the push for mandatory vaccinations by people like Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci. It is already an inescapable reality here in California, where I do not have a choice of what vaccines my daughter is subjected to in order to attend public schools. He also explains the fallacy in the claim that vaccines are the biggest improvement in human health and life expectancy in the past century. Dr. Shiva reasons that in place of vaccines, the most important health improvements over the last century have been in quality of living, nutrition, clean running water, improved sewage management, and other such things. He explains that the notion that vaccines are the most important development come from leaders in countries with less than favorable living conditions who just want a labor force that survives on the most streamlined budget. According to the mainstream media and the narrative China has ran with, the COVID-19 virus naturally developed in bats and spread to humans in Wuhan. Yet according to Ben Swan, known for his reality check series and Truth in Media, research on coronavirus in bats was funded in the amount of $3.7 million by the NIAID Foundation headed by Dr. Fauci. Ben Swan does have a credible history for honest and fact-based reporting. If this is true, then this creates not only a huge conflict of interest, but also should be interpreted as an act of bioterrorism. Bill Gates has said on record that the only way for us to socially come out of this lockdown is to have a vaccine, with a method to track who has received it. Also stating that he has 7 different facilities working towards 7 different vaccines, and in a separate interview calling for a national tracking system similar to South Korea. Apparently being the second wealthiest man on the planet somehow makes him an authority on what the world needs, and when things can return to normal. Anthony Fauci stated that our country will never go back to normal until a vaccine is developed, claiming that it can be done in 18 months. Which sounds mildly unrealistic since we still do not have a vaccine for SARS or other coronaviruses. While neither Fauci nor Gates have implicitly said mandatory vaccination, they have both implied the intent of holding the world hostage in a state of shutdown until a vaccine is implemented on a global scale. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has volunteered his state as a laboratory for coronavirus vaccine testing. Most recently, Nancy Pelosi put an addendum on the most recent relief bill that would put a requirement for mandatory vaccinations amongst gun owners, an extremely odd combination. Overall, the idea that people do not deserve the choice over what goes into their body seems to be the prevailing mode of logic. Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai holds the opinion that the human immune system is more powerful than given credit for, that it is prepared and more effective than many vaccines being pushed by people like Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci. Dr. Shiva also mentioned the importance of proper nutrition, which enables the immune system to be at its most effective state. This is where a recent interview with Vandana Shiva ties in. In the interview, she discusses how Bill Gates is playing a harmful role in the theft of genetic information in agriculture, claiming that he is continuing efforts and tactics right along other corporate entities such as Monsanto. Vandana claims that in communities where untainted non-GMO seeds were stored and are now in use, great things are happening. The crops are better suited for the environment, and communities are managing to keep the profit from crops local. She also mentions that the GMO crops are untested for human impact, that the kind of copy and paste science being used by Gates is not how nature works and will continue to fail. The main point made by Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai and Vandana Shiva is that by playing God with agricultural and human biosystems, Bill Gates and people like him are putting our planet and our very existence in grave danger. Under the guise of combating drug trafficking, ships from the U.S. Navy have been deployed to the coast of Venezuela, speculated by some to be part of the continued effort to oust the leader Maduro. A lot of government effort is going into the pandemic itself, passing ridiculous spending bills in an attempt to compensate for the millions of people out of work. It has been interesting to witness how quick local municipalities such as our own fall into step with the national and state agenda, especially in seemingly less affected areas such as our own. While the general public is giving nature some respite, that is not the case for the industrial sect and those lobbying for more access to natural resources on both land and sea. One example is the continuing progress of the Keystone XL pipeline, which started during the Obama era. Other advances have been made in the effort to deregulate drilling at sea and open up more federal land to be used for the extraction of both oil and natural gas. Another event currently happening is a result of the sudden usage drop in fossil fuels. Gas is at an all-time low price for recent years and tankers are full, waiting off the edge of every coastline. Transmission pipes are also full, having nowhere to go and insufficient demand for the supply. With all that oil just sitting, the likelihood of an eventual leak or spill is high. With everyone being compelled to stay at home, nature has received a much-deserved break from humanity. Empty beaches have drawn turtles to lay eggs by the thousands being one example. With less people on the road, smog production is down, leaving many skylines clearer than they have been in decades. There is a flip side though. With all the masks and gloves being used, many just discard used ones on the ground. Many parks and trails are not officially opened or maintained, with the usual trash bin cleanup. Instead of packing stuff out, people just throw things on the ground or leave them near a trash bin. The most idiotic thing ever is when people bag up their dog's poop then leave it on the side of the trail. At that point it makes more sense to just leave the poop. Due to COVID-19 and related regulations, our nation's food supply is in jeopardy. Lack of people willing to come to work along with the closure of key processing plants are causing bottlenecks. This is true in agriculture as well, entire crops being tilled under because there is no one there to perform the harvest. In the meat industry, this will likely result in wasteful loss of animals being put to death, and loss of human life due to shortages and unavailability. One of the messages inscribed in the Georgia Guidestones asks that we maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. In this we have failed. Humanity has taken great strides to view itself as separate from nature. Whether that is true or not can lead to two completely different assessments of life and reality as we currently know it. If we choose to view humanity as separate from nature, then we can argue that what is bad for mankind may very well be good for nature. Less human mobility and even loss of human life within this reasoning result less impact and an overall increase in the well-being of the planet. The other assessment would beg the question that perhaps we are wrong in our assessment of being separate of nature, that perhaps human innovation and technological advances are natural in that they have occurred repeatedly in other civilizations. That we are as much a part of the natural world as ever, we are just assholes about it with no concern for other inhabitants of this world. But perhaps that is natural too, and somehow we are meant to find balance with innovation and respect for our surroundings. Man-made or not, could COVID-19 be such a catalyst? Could this be part of shift in consciousness on a global scale? Will a final attempt form corporate-controlled centralists become so openly apparent that humanity throws the shackles off and chooses a better path? I definitely hope so.